Is a salt chlorinator like the CircuPool CORE35 really the right fit for your backyard pool, or are you better off sticking with traditional chlorine? Who will actually see a benefit, who might be better off skipping it, and does the price make sense for the average homeowner who just wants clean water without a chemistry headache? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Those are the 3 questions I keep hearing from people who are on the fence, and they're the same ones that drove me to dig into how this kind of system works in everyday life. First off, let's talk about what a salt chlorinator does and why you might even consider one. Instead of manually adding chlorine tablets or liquid, the system runs a low-level salt solution through a titanium cell that converts the salt into chlorine. The water stays sanitized, but you don't have to chase down a shop for chemicals every week. In theory, it's a set and forget solution, but the reality depends a lot on installation, pool size, and how often you swim. The CORE35 is marketed for pools up to 35,000 gallons, which covers everything from modest in-ground installations to larger above-ground setups. The biggest claim is its revolutionary compact design that promises a DIY install without the need for a professional. If you've ever wrestled with a bulky generator that required a separate concrete pad, the idea of a unit that tucks into a niche or a side cabinet is appealing. The titanium cell is made in the USA and comes with an 8-year limited warranty, which is longer than most competitors and suggests the manufacturer expects the unit to last well beyond the typical 5-year pool remodel cycle. So, who should actually buy this? If you're a homeowner who already has a salt-ready pool, meaning you have a basic saltwater system or you're comfortable adding the recommended 2, 5,000, and 3,000 ppm of salt, the CORE35 can be an upgrade that gives you finer control. I've spoken with a few pool owners who run a 15,000 gallon in-ground pool and found that the 1.4 pounds chlorine output per hour keeps the water clear even after a weekend of heavy use, without the cloudy spikes you sometimes see with tablet feeders. For those who swim frequently, especially families with kids who love splashing around, the consistent sanitization means less irritation to eyes and skin, which is a practical win you can actually feel. On the flip side, if you're renting a house, have a small above-ground pool under 10,000 gallons, or you're not comfortable handling any amount of salt, the CORE35 may be overkill. The system still requires you to maintain a proper salt level, and while the installation is marketed as no DIY penalty, you still need to route some wiring and fit the unit into a space that can handle its IP66 weatherproof rating. For a modest 5,000 gallon pool that you only use a few weeks a year, the upfront cost plus the ongoing need to keep the salt balanced might not justify the convenience. Now let's get into the day-to-day usability. Once you hook the unit up, you set the desired chlorine output on a simple digital panel. The panel is intuitive enough that you don't need a pool tech degree. You turn a knob, set a target, and the unit modulates the current through the titanium cell. In practice, this means you can walk out of the house, glance at the panel, and see that the system is delivering, say, 0.8 pounds per hour, which is perfectly adequate for a 20,000 gallon pool in moderate weather. The real advantage shows up when a storm dumps leaves and debris into the water. Instead of adding a surge of chlorine tablets, the CORE35 simply ramps up its output, smoothing out the chlorine level without you having to intervene. One practical weakness that surfaces in real-world use is the reset behavior after power outages. The unit is designed to restart automatically, but it briefly drops chlorine output until the system restabilizes. For most pools that's a few minutes, but in a commercial-grade setup where you can't afford any dip in sanitation, you'd need a backup power source. Homeowners with occasional outages may notice a short lull, and if you're relying on the system to keep the water crystal clear for a party, you might have to add a quick tablet as a stopgap. Another hidden trade-off is the salt maintenance itself. Adding salt isn't difficult, but it does change the corrosion dynamics on pool surfaces and metal fixtures. I've heard from a few DIYers that after 6 months of using a salt system, they noticed a faint discoloration on metal ladders or the pool's handrail. The titanium cell's IP66 rating means the unit itself is well protected from the elements, but you still have to monitor any metal components in the pool to avoid premature wear. This isn't a deal breaker for most people, but it's a nuance that rarely shows up in the marketing copy. Value for money is where the CORE35 starts to differentiate itself. At a price point that sits a bit higher than entry-level chlorine generators, you're paying for the longer,